Okay, another little update. We are making progress. I've had it running a bit longer now. It's ticking over quite sweetly now. The mixture screw is well sensitive. I've got a feeling it's running a bit rich, but when I sort of move it a touch, it's a bit too weak and then it dies a bit. And so I think I need to drive it a bit and warm it up well, and then set the emissions on the emissions tester, and then tweak the timing a bit possibly afterwards. But tomorrow I'm gonna put the air filter back on now, because there's nothing leaking there on that fuel distributor. That all seems good. The throttle's sticking a little bit sometimes. If you blip the throttle, it comes off. If you sort of hold it, if you sort of put your foot on gently and take it off. I have put a bit of WD-40 down there, and that has helped. It might be one of the cables sticking. It might be the accelerator not returning, or it's probably the cruise control one. But I think the cruise controls one is the one with the two little crosshead screws on in the middle there. But yeah, I'm happy that the mixture's not far off. Seems to be running okay. Bit of confusion as where these vacuum pipes go. There's a guy who's doing a white one, and he's basically said the bottom one goes to the back of it. But the way I've got it running now is the retard goes to the front of the sort of, you see that idle screw just next to there on the left, underneath the cold start valve or cold start injector. There's a takeoff there. Now that one gives you vacuum when the throttle is shut. The other one, there's no vacuum when the throttle is shut. So Lord, that's got to draw it off, retard the timing when the throttle closes, which is what it's doing. The other one goes to the back, and when you rev it, you get a vacuum from there. So whether his is different, I think his might be a 4.5, his is an earlier car, so whether it's different, but I think it's the, if you sort of, see if I can show you now. Yeah. So there's three there. It's not the rubber one, it's not the middle one, it's the one on the right, the braided one. That's the one that goes to the vacuum advance. It doesn't work the other way around, so I'm pretty sure it's not. But yeah, like I said, the regulator's pretty dry. It smokes a bit when it's warm, but I think there's a lot of residue oil and crap lying around. I've had it running. I don't think the gauges are working bang on right. When I've sort of been driving up and down the road in the gears, and it's been fine, and it's sort of sitting, you'll probably see where it's sitting at. Yeah, it's sort of sitting at about 3/4 most of the time when it's ticking over. But then sometimes it does seem to get a bit hotter, and it has gone up to sort of near the red. But at the same time as going near the red, the fuel gauge goes to the top, which makes me suspect that the temperature sender isn't working right. And if you turn it off, the temperature gauge stays at the top, and then if you tap it with your fist gently, it drops back down. But then when you turn it back on, it does go to the top again. So whether the gauge is faulty or it's reading sort of slightly off, the voltmeter that was working okay before I took the engine out isn't now. It's reading just over 12. It was reading at 14 before, but it's reading just over 12 now. You can't really see. Yeah, it was when it was running. But I have checked it on the battery, and it is charging. It's charging at just over 14, which is fine. So I'm not too fussed about that. Ideally, I'd like that to work. I think what I'm going to have to do at some stage, well, probably next, is take all the fuses out and clean all the connections up on the fuses, and clean all the fuses up. They all look okay, but you can just have one dirty connection, which don't out. And I think any earths I see, any extra earths I can see in the engine bay, I'm going to double check all them as well. There's a couple, one bolted on there. There's a clump of them here. To be fair, some of them wires don't look brilliant on that, so I'm going to put all them into one connector and bolt it onto the head, I think. there's a bunch of ones down there. But yeah, I don't think it is overheating. I'm just a bit until I know for sure. I'm a bit dubious about running it for too long. It does feel very hot, but it will do because it's only got a viscous fan. But when it had been running, it was saying it was, you know, on the red at the top of the temperature gauge. I gave it 5 minutes and undid the radiator cap, and there was virtually no pressure there at all. A little bit, but if it was that hot, you'd imagine it to chuck a bit of water out or be venting out the cap as it should do, and a bit of water coming out the cap. There's no sign of that. So the viscous fan's obviously doing its job. I've had this before with my old, I had an E30 BMW, and when that was sat ticking over, it did used to get 3/4 temperature and a bit more. That didn't have an electric fan. This has got an electric fan. I think it's on brackets, must be on brackets like that, because the aircon rad's gone. I'm assuming it would originally be further back and the aircon rad would be in front of it. I think that's how it works. I have checked it by bypassing the wiring and putting a live to it, and it does work. That you see down there, there's basically those blue wires. Well, that blue wire is a live feed, which is connected to the red one somehow here. Maybe it's a live feed to something else because there's two coming off it. And then the brown one is a brown one to that. I've had the ignition on and checked there's a live there, and there is a live to one side of that switch. The white stuff on there's grease. I put a bit of spray grease on there so it didn't corrode, because they were all corroded a bit before. So yeah, there's a live to there when the ignition's on, and if I bridge those two, and the earth on that goes to this clump of earth here. I've done a continuity check and it does. It's earthed. And with the ignition on, if you bridge them two across, the fan comes on. So, which leads me to believe that temperature fan switch is shagged. It's no good, which is kind of good. So that might explain why it is getting a bit up there, because that would probably come on when it gets to 3/4. It should. Most cars it comes on when it's bit past halfway, and if that's not coming on at all, then that would explain why it's sort of it's getting a bit hot. I did, when I was driving up and down the road, it sort of stayed at 3/4 and didn't go above that, and I was, you know, but it seemed to drive okay. Gearbox seems to work fine, goes in the gears okay. When it's really cold, it does tend to idle high for a couple of minutes, a minute or so, and then it kind of dies down and goes down. At the moment, playing about with the mixture and the idle screw, I've got it ticking over to about 1,000, because it's up and down a little bit. So if I have it at sort of 900 or 800, it's when you put it in gear, sometimes it's a bit like it's going to stall. So I've left it at 1,000. I'm happy with that. I don't mind. I'd rather have it ticking over a little bit faster, because the viscous fan's going a bit quicker when you're in traffic and stuff. So. But yeah, I'm hoping there's nothing overheating wrong with it. I don't think there is. The fact that when the temperature gauge reads maximum, the fuel gauge reads maximum at the same time is kind of weird, because maybe they share the same live or the same earth or something like that. If it was just the temperature gauge and everything else was working, I'd be a bit more concerned. But the fact that it stays up there, and the fact that when you turn it off, it stays at the top, makes me think that it may be reading wrong. It may be reading out of scale. So when it's on 3/4, it's on half, and when it's on full, it's on 3/4. But I don't think it's cooking itself, because if it was cooking itself, it would be boiling up on the bottle. And when I took the cap off, it would be proper shooting water out, and you know, and it doesn't sound horrendous when it's hot. It does smoke a bit round the engine, but I think a lot of that's like oily residue round the heads. Maybe some of the Loctite that's squeezed out when I did the cam bolt carriers. Maybe that burns off a bit and smokes a bit. It's mostly the exhaust. It kind of comes from the back of the exhaust. So yeah, it doesn't seem to be dropping any oil or anything like that, so it maybe is getting a bit hot. But I think with that fan switch, if we get that fan switch and that fan cuts in a bit earlier, I don't think it's going to be an issue. If I find that it's driving and everything, but it does get a bit too hot in traffic, what I might do is get a double fan kit. You can get like 2 smaller fans and wire them into that. I don't know what temperature that should come in at. But I would have thought if the gauge is reading what it's reading, even if it's 3/4, that should have come on by now. It's obviously, it's got a livening nerve to it, and it doesn't seem to be switching at all, and the radiator's very hot, and the engine feels hot, you know, as it's like right up to temperature, maybe a bit hotter. So that's my next job. I'm going to sort out one of those for that. See what this fan, if this fan's not big enough, I might get a couple of twin fan and put it on. But yeah, I think tomorrow's order of the day is put the airbox on. I'm going to order one of them switches, probably put the bonnet on now. I'm hopefully not going to have to take the engine out again, so I'll put the bonnet on. And I think one headlight doesn't work, main beam does, but one headlight doesn't work, and one stop light and tail light don't work, I think. The heater fan doesn't seem to work either. I'm not asked about that, too bothered about that at the moment. I just want to get so all the lights are working and everything, and then I can sort of drive it and get it to the MOT place and get the emissions set, and then see what the timing does. When I had my timing light on it, I didn't want to do it too much because the engine was hot and it was saying it was really hot, and I didn't want to carry on sort of revving it up when it was hot. I set the timing, it seemed to be on tick over at about just under 1,000, seemed to be at 10-12 degrees before top dead centre, and it's got a 10 mark and a 26 mark, and when you rev it up quite a bit, it seemed to go past the 26 to what I'd say is about 30 something, 30 odd, which is probably about right. I don't think that's a miss. I was watching a YouTube video about somebody else was talking about these Mercedes injectors that I've put on, and he was apparently saying that they open at a slightly different pressure. I don't know if this is true, but he put some of them on a Golf, I think, and he was saying he seems to know a lot about this kind of stuff, a lot more than I do, and he said that they open at a slightly different pressure. He wasn't sure quite why, but it was meaning that you ended up with more fuel or more air in the system. You know, the way this early setup is, you end up, when it's hot and you turn it off, you end up with more air in the system, so when you come and hot start it, you get problems hot starting. And he put it down to these injectors because of the way, the pressure that they hold in the system, and it's not allowed to relieve it, or something to do with that. But he changed his injectors to the proper VW ones, which I think is like a Mark II Golf 16 valve, and it solved his hot start problem. So if I do get a hot start problem, then I shall be changing the injectors. Hopefully not, because they were like half the price, but if it is a problem, I don't think there's any issue with it running wise. I think he said he reckoned his went a bit better with it, but I think it's to do with, you know, like I say, that when they're hot starting. So if I have a hot starting issue, I know where to sort of look first. Warm up regulator, I think is doing. I'm not going to mess about checking the pressures too much and everything. As long as it drives okay, I'm going to set it up and stuff as much as I can, and then if I think it's not running quite right, then I'll check the pressures. It doesn't seem to go particularly well. It doesn't seem as powerful as I imagine it to be, but I don't know whether that's because it's too rich, it's bogging down a bit, or it's not advancing properly. But I need to sort of put the air filter on. I'm going to clean all the electrics up, get that fan switch sorted, and then I can start. I might even go home in it. I only live 6 miles away, so I might do sort of a trip home in it. So yeah, we're making decent progress. Didn't think that fan would work. It hasn't come on before. So yeah, if you're enjoying the vids, subscribe, give me some likes, tell me what you've been doing. See you next time.